finally, the Wood-Sackhoff effect is inhibition of thyroid hormone release, synthesis and release, when there is sudden large increase in iodine levels, and is mainly due to increase in intracellular iodide concentration. Later on, iodine trapping is decreased. It is transient because later on iodine trapping is decreased, and therefore intracellular iodide concentration cannot increase so much, and thyroid hormone synthesis will continue as normal. Therefore, main point here is decrease in thyroid hormone synthesis when there is sudden large increase in iodide concentration. Large means more than about 100 times the normal intake. Any others? Try to follow the questions in the Google Classroom, because we cannot cover everything, mainly the questions, the analysis portion in the class due to lack of time. And I have selected the questions in such a way that the application aspect of the knowledge will be there. And that is the main thing that you have to apply once you become doctor. And most of the questions will be concentrated around those concepts in your exam cells.
Sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, there can be
Sir, last question.
T level and abnormal T4 level.
Yes, it can be normal T3 and abnormal T4. In mild conditions, it can occur. Mainly, when you say hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, mainly see the thyroid hormone levels, not TSS level. And some of you have made mistake in the last question, and there is obvious decrease in T4 level, free T4 level. I think T3 was normal there. Even in that case, it is hypothyroidism. It may be decrease in T4 or T3, but you know, in blood, most of the hormone is T4. Therefore, in most of the cases, T4 will be first affected. But in some cases, there may be change in T3 alone also. That is different case. But in most of cases, T4 will be changed first. And when there is decrease in T4, it will be hypothyroidism. And TSS increase, that is compensatory in that case. And that does not imply hyperthyroidism. Hypo or hyper depends on thyroid hormone level, that is T4 level, and T3 also in some cases. And one of them may be changed, but another may be normal also. The final one is the overall activity. Clear?
Sir, in the last question, what will be the correct answer? The first option or the C option?
In that question? In our last question?
In last question. Yes, sir.
In which
there was elevated
yes.
TSH level and low T4 level.
Okay. Now, to repeat it, you have to understand that now we know the mechanism of regulation of thyroid hormones. Okay. T3 and T4 levels, they are regulated, and it is not the TSS level that should be maintained at constant level. Finally, the thyroid activity is dependent on T3 and T4 level, say thyroid hormone level, plasma levels, free thyroid hormone levels. And in most of the cases, the disorder, when there are thyroid disorders, the defect is in the thyroid gland itself in most of the cases. But in some cases, the defect may be in the anterior pituitary gland or in the hypothalamus. By looking at the thyroid function test, we can say whether the defect is in the thyroid level or in the anterior pituitary or hypothalamic level. And how can we do that? We know the regulatory mechanism. Whenever there is any change in T3 or say thyroid hormone level, there will be feedback inhibition or feedback change to the TSS level. To say in other words, when there is decrease in T4 level, say, there will be compensatory increase in TSS level to increase T4 synthesis and therefore to take T4 level in the plasma back. Are you following me? The regulation that occurs is of T3 or T4, say thyroid hormones. Finally regulated one is thyroid hormone level, free thyroid hormone level. Therefore, whenever there is increase in free T4, there will be decrease in TSH secretion from the anterior pituitary. And similarly, whenever there is decrease in T4 level in the plasma, there will be increase in TSH level for compensation of that T4 level. Okay. Now, suppose in that case, suppose if TSH was the primary disorder, the first defect was in the TSH level, for example, then what would you expect the level of T4 and T3? Say the disorder is in the pituitary gland and there is increased synthesis of TSH. What do you think will be the level of T3 and T4?
Increase.
The effect of T increased because thyroid is stimulating hormone, as the name suggests. Its effect is to stimulate the thyroid gland to secrete more thyroid hormones. Therefore, if TSH level, increase in TSH level was the primary defect there, the initiating disorder there, T3 and T4 level would increase. But in that case, T4 level is decreased and T3 is also in the lower range, towards the lower limit. Therefore, by this knowledge of regulatory mechanism, we conclude that the first disorder is decrease in thyroid hormone level. And to compensate that, there is increase in TSH level. Therefore, overall, the case is that of hypothyroidism. Okay, and TSH level, increase in TSH level is for compensation. If TSH level was not increased, T4 level would be even less than that one. Now, is it clear?
In that case, the option A will be right now.
It is a case of hypothyroidism. Yes, that is correct. But the question is choose the incorrect statement. I think the question in the question is you have to choose the incorrect statement. Am I right?
Yes, sir. That I got. But my analysis, I was saying that what will be the result of that. So that was I was asking.
You mean? I did not get your question.
I was just asking what about what will be the result of that question. So that I got that incorrect. I have to choose the incorrect one. But मेरे को बस देखना था कि what will be जो I did was right or not.
And the incorrect one, the incorrect option there was exophthalmos, presence of exophthalmos. Are you confused with that one?
Exophthalmos. No, sir.
And all of the statements there are, all of the options there are related to that particular case. Therefore, if it is a case of hypothyroidism, we do not expect the person, the lady, to have exophthalmos. Exophthalmos is a clinical feature of hyperthyroidism.
Yes, sir.
Therefore, in that case, we do not expect exophthalmos. The main question there was in the stem of the question. There is question. The doctor suspects a thyroid disorder in the lady, and in the options letter, and the statement is the doctor might have suspected the disorder before asking for investigations based on the finding of exophthalmos. But we do not expect exophthalmos in this lady because it is a case of hypothyroidism. Now, is it clear?
Yes,
okay. Exophthalmos can occur in other thyroid disorders, hyperthyroidism, but the statement was about this particular case. If you were the doctor, you would not expect exophthalmos and then send investigation. Always when we send investigation, we have some diagnosis in our mind and we are trying to confirm it. Therefore, the doctor already suspected hypothyroidism in this case based on some clinical features and then asked for investigation and found the results accordingly. Okay, now we are going to start for today. Today we are going to study some hormones involved in calcium homeostasis. And calcium and phosphate homeostasis, they overlap because there are some major mechanisms that regulate both of them together. Therefore, we are studying both of them together. And from the physiological, functional viewpoint, we take this entire topic as calcium homeostasis. And there are some hormones that play a role in that case. And here we will study parathyroid hormone. Vitamin D3. It is also considered a hormone because it has activities similar to hormones, though it is also found in some dietary sources. Then calcitonin, it is also one hormone. We have mentioned briefly about this one in thyroid gland, and then we will discuss overview of calcium and phosphate regulation. Before going to the hormones directly, we will discuss something about calcium and phosphate. And before doing that, let's think of this question: functions of calcium in the body. Before studying regulation, we have to know why the regulation is important or what are its functions. Blood clotting, I am reading your answers. Blood clotting, muscle contraction, depolarization, muscle contraction, bone mineral, component of bone matrix, bone and cartilage growth, function of enzymes, exocytosis. Okay, good. You have mentioned many of the important functions. Secondary messenger, yes, good. Second messenger. Okay. Now let's see the list again. There are many functions, but to remember some important ones, as you have mentioned, it is constituent of bone substance. It will be better to say constituent of bone only. Matrix mainly related to the other organic substances. You can just say bone. And bone strength and also teeth. It is responsible for strength of the bone or formation of bone and teeth. And it plays role in contraction of skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscles. Did you mention it? And during mechanism of contraction of different types of muscles, and we studied the role of calcium, very important to initiate contraction, muscle contraction. And it plays role in blood clotting. We have already mentioned one of the clotting factors. It is, and exocytosis. You also mentioned, and you have already studied the synaptic transmission. Calcium influx initiates this process, and also secretion of many substances, just like neurotransmitters and hormones also. It has role, and it plays role in transmission of nerve impulses. Therefore, for nervous system also, it has important role. And calcium level affects the excitability of the neurons. Now, in this figure, it shows distribution, intake and excretion of calcium in the body. And when we say calcium, we have to first think of bone. Most of the calcium that is in our body is stored in the bones, and over 99% of the total bone. Then it is in dynamic equilibrium with extracellular fluid, the double arrow. So the calcium can be released from bone to come to the extracellular fluid, and it can go from the extracellular fluid to deposit in the bone. According to the necessary in which direction the reaction goes, it will depend on the calcium levels in the extracellular fluid. And similarly, extracellular fluid and cells, they are also in equilibrium. And also from the dietary sources, mainly the dairy products, meat, calcium that enters the body through the GI tract, it is absorbed. And the figures here, they tell about the average amount daily daily amount. And you can see here, again, from between the intestine and extracellular fluid, plasma, also the relation is bidirectional. And you can see here, most of the calcium that is taken is excreted in feces. Only a small amount is absorbed. And it is this excretion in the feces is also added due to the secretion in different gastrointestinal juices, and also shedding of the epithelium. And another component here important is related to the kidneys. And kidneys, they have important role in regulation of calcium. You have already studied renal system and reabsorption of calcium. And various hormones, they affect calcium transport in this different at these different levels, at the intestinal level, at the level of the bones, and at the level of the kidney also. And you will see later that most of the regulatory mechanisms that are mediated by those hormones we have mentioned, it is related to variation of calcium transport or release or exchange in these different levels. Okay, to be more quantitative, we will see the next slide, and before it, try to answer this question. Which of the following contains the highest amount of calcium in the body? Okay, bones. You have done correct, bones, more than 99%. Okay, next. Okay, I have changed the slide. You know that is not very difficult one, but important one. Bones, 99% of total body calcium. Cells, inside the cells, 1%. Extracellular fluid, 0.1%. And this is the percentage of total body calcium, not in terms of concentration. Remember it. You know, intracellular fluid has lower calcium levels as compared to extracellular fluid. But as the intracellular fluid volume is large, and more importantly, the calcium stores are not in the cytoplasm or cytosol, not in the cytosol. The calcium stores are in some other cell organelles like endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, etc. Therefore, the total calcium in the body is distributed more in the cells than in the extracellular fluid. Okay, and even in the extracellular fluid. Now, when we say calcium regulation, mainly the parameter that is regulated is in the extracellular fluid. The physiological regulatory mechanisms that regulate calcium level, they mainly sense the change in extracellular fluid. Therefore, the most important one here, from the physiological viewpoint, from the regulatory viewpoint, is extracellular fluid calcium. Though it is only 0.1%, it is the main determinant of regulation. And even out of the calcium that is present in extracellular fluid, about 50% of the calcium is in the ionized form. Means half of it is ionized and half it is bound to some proteins or some other ions like phosphates. And low ionic calcium in plasma is called hypocalcemia, causes nervous system excitement and tetany, called hypocalcemic tetany. You know that the phenomenon tetanization, that is sustained muscle contraction when there is rapid repeated stimulation. Decrease in level of calcium ions, that is hypocalcemia, also causes increase in excitability of the neurons and muscle membrane also, and therefore there is increase in frequency of the excitation of the muscle fibers. Therefore there is tetany in hypocalcemia. It is one of the important signs of hypocalcemia, one of the first signs of hypocalcemia, tetany. And mostly the muscles in the hand, they are used. there will be sustained contraction of muscles like this one. Involuntary, sustained, strong contraction. Hypocalcemic tetany or carpopedal spasm, that is also. And increased levels of calcium depress nervous system and muscle activity, opposite of hypocalcemia. And these signs will be seen, these clinical signs will be seen when there is change in plasma calcium level, and mostly the ionized form is important. Remember this one. Even the calcium and calcium content of the extracellular fluid, out of that, the ionized form is most important because that is free form, just like thyroid hormones. In case of calcium, also the free form, that is ionic form, is the most important one from regulatory viewpoint. And now in the plasma, this is again distribution, and you can see half is ionized, half is bound mostly to protein and some to other anions like phosphates, calcium phosphate. Remember, we are studying calcium and phosphate together. Regarding phosphorus, again, most of the phosphorus in the body lies in bones, about 85%, then in the cells and extracellular fluid. And its regulation overlaps with calcium regulation, we will see it. And its role is, again, it lies together in most instances with calcium, therefore bone and teeth formation and strength. And in some cases, to some extent, acid-base balance due to the ability of the phosphoric acid and phosphate ions to gain or lose hydrogen ions. And also nerve and muscle functions. And you know, ATP contains phosphate group, phosphorus, and there are many biochemical reactions and enzymatic reactions in which phosphorylation, dephosphorylation are among the key regulatory phenomena. Therefore, phosphorus is also very important. But from the dietary viewpoint, its deficiency is not common, because if we take normal diet, its amount will not be low in a wide variation of diet also. But calcium and vitamin D deficiency can occur easily, and especially in vegetarians. Calcium and vitamin D in vegetarians who are not exposed to sun. Okay, another question for you. Parathyroid glands are situated behind the thyroid glands. Okay, have you studied anatomy of parathyroid glands?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A is true. There are two pairs of parathyroid glands usually, and they lie posteriorly. They are related to the thyroid gland, posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. We will see the figure also. Therefore, A is true. B, vitamin D is synthesized in the skin in the presence of ultraviolet light. B is true. Okay, that is true. All of us know it, I think. Then vitamin D is required for bone health. That is also true. Okay, basics. We are beginning from the basics. Next, calcitonin hormone is secreted by the thyroid gland. That is also true. Which cells in the thyroid gland? C cells, C for calcitonin, or also called parafollicular cells. Okay, good. Thyroid hormones by follicular cells, thyroid follicular cells, and calcitonin by parafollicular on the side of the follicles, also called T cells. Okay, good. Now, in this figure, there are parathyroid glands. You can see here round structures, small round structures. 1, 2, superior and inferior right parathyroid glands, and this one superior and inferior left. And this view is the posterior view, and this gland is thyroid gland. On the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland, you can see the parathyroid glands. Okay, and the importance of this relation is, in case of thyroid surgeries, previously when the function of this gland was not very clear, and it was likely that it is removed with thyroid surgeries. And then thereafter, calcium homeostasis would be disrupted. And that was one of the cue to the function of these glands also, regarding the history of medicine. Okay, and still today, the surgeons take care not to remove these glands when they perform thyroid surgery. Parathyroid hormone is a peptide hormone, and regarding the calcium balance in the body, it is the most potent. The major regulatory hormone is parathyroid hormone. Therefore, if you are asked to mention the hormones that regulate calcium level, you will first mention parathyroid hormone and then others. And it is secreted by the cells called chief cells in the parathyroid gland. Now, being the peptide hormone, it can be transported easily in blood. And regarding the actions, net effect is to rise plasma calcium level and to decrease phosphate level. Remember, in the Google Classroom. Therefore, as it is not physiologically active, we did not talk much about that. And when T3, the normal usual T3 is formed, most of that one is normal T3. And this reverse T3, it is called reverse because the position of iodine atom in the triiodothyronine molecule is different than T3 in the reversed position. Therefore, it is called reverse T3. And its level can change to regulate the normal T3 level in some way. Because when there is excessive T3 level production, the chemical reactions can go towards favoring formation of this reverse T3, so that the active T3 is decreased. Okay, and there is change in starvation also, change in T3 this reverse T1 also, T3 and T4. I will have clear idea about this one, and I will post you in the Google Classroom also. There is one graph also in Canon if you see. Okay, I will post that one also. Clinically correlated questions are interesting to solve. Okay, good. And my main aim is that one also, to give some clinically correlated questions, and so that you will be able to correlate physiology with medicine. And that is the final aim of studying physiology and any basic science also. Okay, thank you. Now, we are talking about actions of parathyroid hormone. The net effect is to increase plasma calcium level and decrease phosphate level. Here, the role of parathyroid hormone is to dissociate calcium and phosphate here, increasing calcium level but decreasing phosphate level. This action of parathyroid gland is actually to increase calcium level, because when plasma phosphate level decreases, there is more dissociation of calcium phosphate to release calcium ions, and finally increasing calcium level further. Therefore, parathyroid hormone, it mainly regulates calcium, and phosphate decrease is used to regulate calcium level. The next one is, now there are the mechanisms how it increases how it affects calcium level. Okay, and one of the mechanism is at the level of the bone, mobilizes calcium and phosphate from the bone to the extracellular plate. It is called bone resorption, opposite of bone deposition. Bone deposition means formation of more bone and deposition of the minerals, calcium salts in the bone. And the opposite one is bone resorption, means calcium salts from the bone, they will be released in the extracellular plate. Okay, and here remember, it mobilizes both calcium and phosphate, because calcium phosphates are important salts in the bone, and they are released together in the extracellular fluid. By this mechanism, the extracellular fluid phosphate would also increase, but it is only one of the mechanisms of action of parathyroid hormone. There are other mechanisms also that decrease phosphate level. And this bone resorption is mediated by osteoclasts. You know the functions of osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Osteoblasts, they are responsible for bone deposition, and osteoclasts mainly bone lysis. Now, when there is increase in activity of osteoclasts or degradation or lysis of bone, there is secondary increase in activity of osteoblasts also to increase bone deposition. Because for maintaining normal bone health in physiological conditions, there will be equilibrium between bone deposition and resorption, and this makes bone remodeling possible. In young children, the bone deposition and remodeling, bone deposition is much at a higher rate than in adults. Even in adults, there are continuous changes in the bones. Overall, there will not be growth of the bone overall, but there are remodelings. That is resorption and deposition of the bone. Now, next one, the upper two ones are the same one. I forgot to delete. And the next one is increase in intestinal absorption of calcium and phosphate. From the bone, parathyroid hormone releases calcium and phosphate from bone into extracellular fluid to increase extracellular fluid levels. Also from the intestine, it increases absorption of calcium and phosphate, again to increase their level in extracellular fluid. And another effect is to increase this active form of vitamin D synthesis in the kidneys. This synthesis occurs in the kidneys. You have already studied the endocrine functions of kidneys, and one of them was vitamin D synthesis. And these three important functions of parathyroid hormones, and one at the level of bone, another at the level of intestines, another related to vitamin D3, and next one we missed was at the level of kidneys. Calcium excretion is decreased. It means calcium reabsorption is increased, but phosphate excretion is increased, means reabsorption is decreased under the action of parathyroid hormone. From the intestine, both calcium and phosphate are reabsorbed, and mainly through the actions of vitamin D3. Parathyroid hormone indirectly, main function role is indirectly by vitamin D3. We will see it soon. At the level of bone, release of calcium and phosphate from bone into extracellular fluid. From the intestine, absorption of calcium and phosphates. In the kidneys, reabsorption of calcium but excretion of phosphate. There is the dissociation between calcium and phosphate at the level of kidneys. And finally, phosphate level will be decreased under the influence of parathyroid hormone. That means when there are excessive levels of parathyroid hormone, phosphate level will finally decrease in the plasma, and calcium level will increase. But very high levels can have even increase in phosphate levels due to excessive lysis from bones. For now, just remember these four actions, and remember the synthesis of vitamin D under the influence of parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone is essential, necessary for formation of this active form of vitamin D3. Now, how parathyroid hormone secretion is controlled? As we have seen, it has role in calcium balance, and we will see it in detail again. And for every hormone, there are control mechanisms. And you see, in most of the cases, the control mechanism also depends on the parameter that is controlled by the hormone itself. In other words, parathyroid hormone regulates calcium level, and calcium level regulates or controls parathyroid hormone secretion. And by this mechanism, this feedback loop, there is finally homeostasis. And its secretion varies with extracellular fluid calcium ion concentration. See here, ion free form is mainly responsible for this feedback. And what is the direction of this variation? Decrease in extracellular plasma calcium level will increase parathyroid hormone secretion. You can understand it. When there is decrease in calcium ion concentration, there will be more secretion of parathyroid hormone. And parathyroid hormone will increase calcium level to take back it to normal. Simple. Just understand the relation. And the relation is finally working to take the calcium level normal. Okay, now in this figure, we summarize the secretion, control of secretion, and also the effects of parathyroid hormone. When there is low calcium level in the plasma, see the ionic calcium, plasma or extracellular fluid, ionic calcium, it is same in the plasma and extracellular fluid, and it is sensed by calcium sensing receptors in the parathyroid cells. And when there is decrease in calcium level, there is increase in parathyroid hormone secretion. We have just mentioned it. Now its effects in the bone will be bone resorption, means release of calcium and phosphate from the bone into the extracellular fluid, and also calcium efflux. And if you go into detail about it, it is mediated through the osteocytes instead of osteoclasts. Bone lysis is mainly by osteoclasts, and calcium efflux is also mediated by osteocytes. Okay, anyway, the final result is to release calcium from bone into the extracellular fluid. Therefore, calcium ion level will increase here. The initiating stimulus was decreased. Now it is increasing, means the finally it will come back to normal. Another effect in the kidney, increased synthesis of vitamin D3 active form, increased calcium reabsorption, and decreased phosphate reabsorption. And we are also describing phosphate in relation to calcium, and you have seen they are closely related. And here, when phosphate reabsorption is decreased, there is more excretion of phosphate. It means in the extracellular fluid, phosphate level will decrease, and there will be more dissociation of calcium phosphate and more release of calcium ions from the calcium phosphate salts in the plasma. And in the intestines, there is increase in absorption of both calcium and phosphate. And from this relation, you can see parathyroid hormone. It is mainly concerned with plasma calcium ion level. And it together with this vitamin D, it will conserve calcium ions. And through the mediation of vitamin D3, it will also absorb phosphate ions from the intestine. Therefore, its action is not solely to decrease phosphate ions. It is also helping absorption from the intestine. Therefore, overall, it favors phosphate deposition in the bones or body also. But when there are excessive levels and when there are low vitamin D levels, the net effect might be decrease in phosphate levels in the plasma. Now to talk about vitamin D3, vitamin D is a group of steroid substances, and D3 is mainly physiologically important, more common we can say. And even vitamin D3, not all forms of vitamin D3 are active. The final active form is 1,25-dihydroxy D3. Dihydroxy means there are two hydroxyl groups. There is two-step hydroxylation. One is at position 1 and another position 25. And cholecalciferol, that is same as vitamin D3, is formed in the skin as a result of radiation of 7-dehydrocholesterol by the ultraviolet rays. And here comes the role of UV light in the skin. Cholecalciferol is also vitamin D3, but not hydroxylated yet, and it is not active so much. And the reactions are summarized here. You will study again in biochemistry For now, just remember, in the presence of sunlight in the skin, 7-dehydrocholesterol is converted to vitamin D3, also called cholecalciferol, in the skin. And now it is transported in the blood, and by the action of 25 hydroxylase in the liver, it is hydroxylated at 25%, and 25 hydroxycholecalciferol is formed, or 25 hydroxy vitamin D3. Now it is further hydroxylated by 1 alpha hydroxylase to form 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol, or 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3, and it is the most active form. And another reaction is catalyzed is catalyzed by this one, 25 hydroxylase enzyme, and forms 24 25 dihydroxycholecalciferol, and this is not so active. Therefore, this chemical reaction can also regulate the levels of 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol in the blood. When there is excess of vitamin D3, 25 hydroxylation will be favored, and when there is deficiency, 1 alpha hydroxylase is favored. And this reaction occurs in the kidney. Therefore, in case of renal diseases, chronic renal diseases, adequate amounts of vitamin D3 are not formed. Therefore, there is probability, likelihood of bone disorders. Okay. For vitamin D3, the major source is exposure to sunlight and synthesis in the skin. And in people who are normally exposed to sun, its deficiency is not likely. But in people who are not exposed to sun, who work indoor and in winter seasons, there is possibility. And there are some dietary sources also, like oily fish, red meat, liver, egg yolk, etc. And you can see it is again rich in non-vegetarian diets. Therefore, vegetarians may be in risk if they are not exposed to sun. And chemical nature, by chemical nature they are steroids. Therefore, vitamin D is steroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone is peptide hormone. Storage in the liver, just like thyroid hormones are stored in the thyroid gland, vitamin D is also stored in liver. Therefore, even if there is vitamin D deficiency from low exposure to sun or dietary deficiency, the stores in the liver will be used for some months. And being the steroid hormones, the receptors are inside the cell, nuclear receptors. Now, regarding the actions, we have already seen it promotes intestinal calcium absorption and also intestinal phosphate absorption. Calcium absorption may be a problem when there is dietary deficiency or some intestinal disorders like diarrhea. And it is not very, many of the dietary sources are not very rich in calcium also. But phosphate, dietary insufficiency is not a problem. Still, to regulate, vitamin D3 can increase its absorption from the intestines. And it decreases renal calcium and phosphate excretion. See the difference between action of vitamin D3 and parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone would conserve calcium, that is, increase reabsorption of calcium, but excrete phosphate in urine. But vitamin D3 reabsorbs both of them. But more potent effect is that of parathyroid hormone. And it is necessary for normal calcification of bone matrix. Okay, you know it. And in the bones, if there is vitamin D deficiency, there is no adequate mineralization of the bones. Therefore, you can say it helps in bone deposition. It is required for bone deposition. But its relation with parathyroid hormone is somewhat complex in this regard. And it causes rickets. It means its deficiency. Vitamin D deficiency causes rickets in children and Similar disease, osteomalacia in adults. In both cases, there is inadequate bone mineralization, but the clinical features differ because in children, bones are growing, and therefore, when there is vitamin D deficiency, the effects in bones are more profound. There may be even bending of the bones in more severe cases. In osteomalacia in adults, there is inadequate bone mineralization and bones become weak. Now, this is a cross-section, microscopic section of thyroid gland. And we have already seen this figure. These are thyroid follicles, and on the side between the follicles there are some C cells. You can see the C cell here on the side of the follicle, these C cells, and these cells secrete calcitonin. It is easy to remember. C for calcitonin, parafollicular name for being on the side of the follicles. And its effect is to have the action that are opposite to parathyroid hormone. Therefore, remember just the actions of parathyroid hormone and its effects are opposite. Some of the effects, but it has not very widespread action like parathyroid hormone. It is not very important in humans and in adult humans, but in children, when bones are growing, still growing, it has a significant role. But in adult humans, its role is not so important. But in case of some abnormalities, pathological conditions, it might have significant effects. But in some animals, it has important role. Therefore, I am not going to discuss more about it. Just remember its source and its effect. It tends to decrease the plasma calcium level by decreasing bone resorption. Means it decreases release of calcium and phosphate from bones into the plasma, extracellular rate. Okay. Now, with the knowledge of the calcium distribution in different body parts and hormones that regulate, now we are going to summarize the regulation of calcium. And you know the functions of calcium in the body. And when there are deficiencies, not all functions will be affected in the same manner or same degree. When there are low calcium levels, the first effect will be seen on the bones because they are the stores. When there are mild deficiencies, the bones, as the stores, they will supply calcium levels, and therefore extracellular fluid calcium level will not decrease much. But when there is prolonged deficiency of calcium or vitamin D, there will be decrease in the stores in the bones. Then the bones will be weaker than normal. And when the reserves in the bones, they are decreased too much, the calcium level will significantly decrease in the extracellular fluid. And even minor decrease in extracellular fluid calcium level has profound effects in physiology. And there will be increased or change in the excitability of the neurons, muscles. And therefore, when there is hypocalcemia, even a mild case, that will cause tetany, that is sustained muscle contraction, involuntary, that will be painful also. The person will not be able to relax the muscles, those involved muscles. And when laryngeal muscles are involved, even the respiratory way can be obstructed and death can occur. And on the other hand, when calcium levels are very high, for example, in parathyroid hormone poisoning, there will be excessive calcium levels in the blood, in the plasma or extracellular fluid, and there will be calcification in the abnormal places, like the alveolar spaces in the respiratory tract and in other areas in the body, and that can also lead to death. Okay, and normal plasma calcium level normal plasma calcium level ion concentration is regulated between in this range 1.1 to 1.3 millimoles per liter. This is ionic form. Remember, if you have to mention total calcium in the plasma, just double it because 50% is ionic. And if you convert it to mg per deciliter, multiply by 4 because atomic weight of calcium is 40. And for some conversion factors, you can just multiply by 4. Ionic plasma calcium 1.1 millimoles per liter, 4.5 mg per dl. And for total calcium, just if one say just calcium level, double it because 50% is ionic. It is around 9. Okay. And extracellular fluid calcium concentration is normally regulated precisely, very precisely. Whenever there are even minor changes in plasma calcium level, parathyroid hormone level will immediately change, and that will take the calcium levels back, maybe from bone resorption or increased reabsorption from the kidneys, or increased absorption from the intestines, and increased synthesis of vitamin D. How calcium levels are regulated? We have mentioned the hormonal control, and there is another chemical control, just chemical reactions, buffer action of calcium salts in the bone. It means there are calcium salts in the bone, amorphous calcium salts. We call them amorphous calcium salts in contrast with the crystalline salts. Hydroxyapatite is crystalline. There are some other salts also, like calcium phosphates in the bones, just calcium phosphates in the bones, and they can give calcium ions when necessary, and they can take calcium ions when necessary again. And these are just reversible chemical reactions. Therefore, when there is excessive calcium ions in the ECF, there will be combination of these calcium ions and other ions like phosphate to form calcium phosphate. And when there is decrease in calcium level, calcium phosphate dissociates to give calcium ions. And the stores of these calcium salts are mainly in the bone. We have already talked the hormonal action. And to summarize the hormonal action, there is the figure. You can go through it on your own. We are close to the end of the class. This is again the summary of the same thing that we have already mentioned. If you do not understand something, we will discuss it again. For now, I am changing the slide. And there are some questions. You can try to answer them on your own. Try to figure out. And it is also, if you answer these questions, it will also provide a summary of the class. Okay, thank you very much. You know the answer for this question. All of the above is the answer. Okay, if you have any questions from parathyroid hormones, we will discuss in the Google Classroom. You can post questions there. And for more information, you can read from books also. We have provided only the essential summary. And if you know this much, that is a good amount. And if you like to read more, you can read from books also. And next, we will start endocrine pancreas. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, shall I end it here?